Hello and most welcome to 1186 of the Heidegger series, and we'll continue with this tremendous article by Dirk K F Meijer, Dutch scientist and philosopher. Revolutionary art at times has served the functioning of preparing for the future. The faculty we use to grasp the nature of the out there is our imagination. Somewhere within the matrix of our brain, we construct a separate reality created by a disembodied thinking consciousness. This inner reality is unconnected to the external space and exists outside the stream of linear time. This inner spectral vision amounts to a mental opinion unique to each individual of who the world works. When an entire civilization reaches a consensus about how the world works, when the belief system seems to be elevated to the supreme status of a paradigm, whose premises appear to be so obviously certain that no one has to prove them anymore. According to the new physics, the observer and the observer is somehow connected, and the inner domain of subjective thought turns out to be intimately conjoined to the external sphere of objective facts. Through the complementarity of art and physics, these two fields intimately entwine to form a lattice upon which we all can climb a little higher in order to construct our view of reality. Understanding this connection should enhance our appreciation for the vitality of art and deepen our sense of awe before the ideas of modern physics. Thus, art and physics, like wave and particle, can be seen as an integrated duality. They are simply two different but complementary facets of a single description of the world. Integrating art and physics will kindle a more synthesized awareness, which begins in wonder and perhaps ends with wisdom. Mathematics of the torus can be related to art in many ways. One can study art mathematically, looking for symmetries or other relations in the construction of a painting or sculpture. Conversely, mathematical algorithms can be used to help create art. Fractal systems, for instance, can recreate realistic shapes of plants, mountains, clouds. Famously, perspective drawing has a mathematical basis and is a good example how different the human brain is from a digital computer. Perhaps one reason for this effectiveness of mathematics is that many laws of physics can be expressed in terms of minimizing free energy or minimizing action. That is also an important aspect of torus dynamics. In the light of the above-mentioned circular movement, of creative endeavor, the torus geometry may also be applied to the art process, and more particular in the artistic process on the basis of personal experience, intuitive vision, intention, imagination, and technical realization of the becoming piece of art. In the very process of designing and making, a personal recurrent process of imaging, mental projection, intrinsic uncertainty, rejection of the initial concept, forced reconstruction, intrinsic uncertainty, and possible feedback. They all picture the internal struggle of the artist. Yet finally, the pieces of the puzzle fall in place, and not without compromises. The choice is made to give birth to a final material or written representation of the initial impulse. The whole process can be envisioned as a flow of inner information fed by the dream or vision lying at the basis of the creative activity that always interacts with the outer world of instrumentation and potential reactions of the art spectators projected by the artist. In terms of the torus modeling, the finalization of the art concept can be conceived as a sort of knotting of the spiral process by literally connecting both ends of the toroid information trajectory. The circle is closed and the final product is created. Earlier, Lacan modeled the human mind with three components: the real, the symbolic, and the imaginary, by using a superposition of three tori. This requires, as earlier mentioned, the potential coupling of a large variety of mental and material information units that in a recursive mode suddenly solidify in internally closed knot structures. This is comparable with the standing wave, in that each knotted structure embodies an created artifact, sculpture, painting, art object, poetry, book, etc. Pieces of art are often unique and in time have a permanent character. They may be copied but are generally considered as a final product in the timeless form chosen by the artist. The variation in possible knots that is on the basis of torus geometry is huge. More than 1 million of possible knot variants have been mathematically derived. Non-trivial is the consideration that knotted structures can be unknotted or untied in a postulated fourth space dimension, and multiple knots smoothly transform into each other. In view of such metaphoric aspects, artifacts can be composed out of previous art objects, and art concepts can be inherited or integrated and used as building blocks of novel artistic representations in general. In this respect, it is interesting that knot theory have also been applied in the string end theory and topology in physics. And in particular in quantizing space-time. Works of art may be seen as heterogeneous building blocks of the total field of art. With regard to the required inspiration of scientists and artists in their own way, of analyzing and representing nature, it could be postulated that they both may derive essential information by intuitive mental contact. Meditation, serendipity, synchronicity, with an information domain that is supposed to be underlying our three-dimensional local space geometry. This dynamic electromagnetic field was proposed by David Bohm as an implicate order that through wave interference, the so-called pilot waves, guides matter in our common explicate order world. Bohm argued that we cannot directly observe this dimension, but we can experience it in listening to the wave world of music, with its wonderful mix of memorizing and anticipating harmonic wave patterns up to the complete symphonies. Bohm-Hilly and Bohm-Peet did not provide a distinct physical or mathematical model for this implicate order. Yet various followers did further substantiate this important idea by including a so-called backreation in the information flux from our world to the ZPE energy field, through which this knowledge domain is permanently updated. It was soon realized that all the pervading quantum zero-point energy field could provide a fundamental basis for such a global memory space, since it can store physical wave information by polarization of its fluctuating quantum wave field. Recently, a hidden information domain beyond the Planck scale was theoretically revealed as a so-called spin-liquid matrix. In relation to this, it was earlier stipulated by Gao and Shacklet that a knowledge domain beyond the Planck scale could provide characteristics of the well-known implicate order of David Bohm. There is recent evidence that such a domain outside no spacetime could be constituted by a spin-liquid network, pictured as a geometric relations of information coined as the amplituhedron domain. Experimental support for a deeper information dimension beyond local spacetime was found by Megiddish et al., demonstrating that if one photon belonging to a pair of entangled photons is destroyed, entanglement between a newly created photon with similar features and the no longer existing photon can be detected, while these two photons never coexisted. This is strongly indicative for an information domain beyond our local 3D space-time, in which information of the destroyed photon is somehow stored. Thus, material particles in general should be seen as excitations of an underlying non-material matrix that behave as vortices or perhaps as tori in a 4D setting. A deeper geometrical mathematical information domain was also implied in our mathematical universe by Tegmark, critically discussed by Butterfield. It was postulated by Kepler 2016 and Meijer and Gesink in 2016 that our brain can convert SPE wave information into attractor type of brain activity that may result in a conscious perception of archetypes, geometric forms in their turn, produce conceptions and innovative impulses in science and art. Just going to read from a figure here. Morphogenesis of reality, seen as a fractal process of information unfolding, either from the bottom of an implicate order frequency domain up to the Planck scale, producing elementary particles, atoms, life, molecules for the buildup of whole structure of cells, and organs such as the brain. All elements are proposed to be equipped with a toroidal memory workspace, consciousness, in a scale-invariant manner. Universal information processing finally results in a black hole, white hole structure that top-down transmits information for the fabric of reality and thereby constituting a circular mode of the universe. End of quote there. It is well known that various kinds of mental transcendence, such as meditative states, can inspire artists to see objects in very different perspectives. Such conscious states can also be induced by removal of an intrinsic neural filter in our brain that normally prevents such experiences. For example, by certain programmed forced ventilation techniques or through use of psychoactive drugs. In science and technology, major breakthroughs have been attained by intuition and serendipity, in which, often in a relaxed state, sudden innovative solutions are revealed or new visions seem to be projected. This is either a sort of inductive analysis or through a subjective emotional self-transcendence, sometimes felt as a form of a personal clairvoyance. Wikipedia defines intuition as follows: intuition, a phenomenon of the mind that describes the ability to acquire knowledge without inference or the use of reason. In the light of the evident importance of this aspect in scientific endeavor, it is surprising that so few systematic studies have been performed on methods to facilitate such productive mental states. One example of a selective electromagnetic simulation of certain parts of brain. Another mechanism is the potential selection of our brain of discrete electromagnetic frequencies from the 0-point energy field. that were shown to induce coherent cellular processes in life systems in general, as well as a conscious perception through a field receptive holographic workspace associated with the brain. Such a holonomic memory workspace bears toroidal features and may guide the functional binding of the various brain centers involved in conceptualization and awareness. 4. Taurus as a metaphor in the creation of poetry. Explanation versus implanation. The great Danish physicist Niels Bohr, in conversation with Heisenberg, remarked, "When it comes to atoms, language can be used only as poetry. What is not visible is, in effect, imaginary. And it's not possible to talk about such a thing without metaphors. A poem may be readily understood as a collection of verses, making of the poem a multiverse in its own right. Collections of poems can also be conceived as such. Poetry inspired by the complexities and highlighted by the imagination of physics was framed as quantum poetics. A well-known example to illustrate the use of a metaphoric and archetypical figure in art and science is the Ouroboros, a serpent that seems to swallow its own tail, bringing together the extremities of its body in a circular mode. From ancient times, it was seen as a symbol of eternal return and immortality. More recently, scientists such as Primack projected the relative size of the defined structures in the universe on the snake body, going back from the extremes of the smallest, the Planck scale, to the largest, such as black holes and the entire universe. In this picture, humans seem to take an intermediate position. Yet, what do we actually really learn from this representation of cosmological scaling and the position that we, as human species, take in this respect? The inherent problem of the figure below is that it takes the form of lengthy explanation at a time when there may be recognition of the need for implanation. So-called explanations in science often have the flavor of satisfying reductionism and presuppose a certain consensus, thereby seemingly obtain a rather definite character. In other words, they tend to escape the individual plane, and through this adverse effect may not leave much space for future creativity. They seem to be resistant to the requirement of future proof. Explanations, therefore, can effectively take people out of the plane of reality in which they live, without ensuring that they are nourished by the deeper, potential holistic perspectives offered. Implanation, in contrast, could be understood as a necessary complementary process, enabling people to internalize and integrate knowledge, a sort of unfolding in a more holistic way, information that can be later unfolded spontaneously and then centered in the here and now. The process of looking at the cosmic Ouroboros can be seen as an explanatory trap in the case that it is only considered in a one-dimensional plane, even as depicted here as a two-dimensional figure. As mentioned above, the cyclic dynamics along the body of the serpent has recently been used as a mapping device for scaling the cosmos from micro to macro levels. However, no attention was drawn to any potentially circular dynamics around the serpent's body at each point along its length. The picture avoids to take into account the axis through the center of the circle along with the observer is located, as we know from the torus geometry treated above. Even more curiously, the Ouroboros as pictured at the left in a superficial way takes the form of a zero, a container for nothing. Poetry can actually express this elegantly. And if the wine you drink, the lip you press, and in the nothing all things, and in yes, then fancy while thou art, but what thou shalt be, nothing, thou shalt not be less. So, what is missing? In the circular figure above to the right, we recognize a flat torus, a circling circle, with its known central channel-like axis or central hole. It is in this sense that the empty central portion of the Ouroboros constitutes a form for implanatory process, effectively reflected as going through the plane of the Ouroboros. Now we can conceive of the Ouroboros differently, not as an intoxicating bite or a suffocating swallowing of itself, showing a circular process of self-death, but rather from a completely different perspective. This is realized by asking the question, what can the tail offer to the mouth so that the figure turns out into a symbol of resurrection and ultimate physical rebirth, as alchemists and philosophers like Jung told us a long ago. Here we should employ deeper layers in the toroidal's inner structure, representing the process of implantation that provides a superposition of wave information, recurrent coupling, and thereby informing information mirroring in a process of physical self-reflection. In the framework of the cosmic Ouroboros in figure 8, we now ask which element in nature can connect the various material shapes of the universe at various scales. A potential answer to this puzzle lies in the recognition of the central role of physical information, through which any of these structures can be described. The tail portion entails the smallest quantized size. the Planck scale. Supposedly composed of the smallest units of information, the qubit. The mouth portion of the serpent depicts the largest structure of black holes at the center of all galaxies. Black holes not only gravitationally swallow information, but, according to recent cosmological research, also radiates this information at the surface called the event horizon. Here the smallest scale of the universe meets the largest one known. In this model, the universe is conceived as a living structure that provides an event horizon mediated back radiation of conserved information. In bits or qubits, arising from huge numbers of black holes that are likely distributed through the entire universe. This radiated entangled information is supposed to provide a holographic projection of all there is, including our own planet and its life forms. In the ultimate fate of the universe, a final single black hole that contains the total of all generated information will pass the accumulated information to a so-called converted connected white hole. This supposed final black hole can in this manner function as a dedicated instrument for the rebirth of our universe in a cyclic operating mode. Now, realizing this, we may not longer see the cosmic Ouroboros as a suicidal machine, but rather as an archetype that indeed some symbols resurrection and eternity, beautifully expressed in the Poetry of Life by Jana F. White. I don't fear melting into this earth. Each morning I wake into the air. I do not rise, I do not move, I do not open my eyes until my nose has sensed persuasions, my tongue has tasted sweetness, and my ears have heard the world. I was a child with dreams of becoming. Now I'm older with dreams of being transformed. Nothing and everything is changing. I'm like a snake shedding its skin and biting its tail, erasing the lines of time. The dynamics of the process of implantation, represented by the torus as a mirror that calls for self-reflexive dynamics. In addition, the torus as a cognitive fusion reactor exhibit contraction relaxation loops discussed earlier, in which the torus turns inside out in a vibrating mode. Inviting strange loop trajectories. The strangeness of such a loop, for instance Hofstadter 2007, further suggests that the toroidal Ouroboros is better understood as embodying a cognitive twist, relating inside to outside, as with a Möbius strip. Of note, Stephen Hawking and colleagues have shown that the universe may have the same toroidal geometry. Hawking's Escherverse of the universe could be theory of everything, as stated by the New Scientist. Attractors as product of nonlinear toroidal information flux. Simple nonlinear dynamical systems can exhibit a completely unpredictable behavior, which might be seen to be random, despite the fact that they are fundamentally deterministic. This seemingly unpredictable behavior has been called chaos. Here, the focus is not on finding precise solutions to the equations defining the dynamical system. This seemingly unpredictable behavior has been called chaos. Here, the focus is not on finding precise solutions to the equation defining the dynamical system, but rather to answer questions like, does the long-term behavior of the system depend on its initial conditions? And also, will the system settle down on a steady state in the long term? And if so, and also what are the possible attractors? If the torus dynamics is made up a spiraling circle of information, and a complete one or more fully revolutions, an attractor is produced, that can be viewed upon as a sort of standing wave or scalar. Similar attractors or standing waves can be hypothesized in the science process, since interference of very different theories can lead to unexpected outcomes that seem to revolutionize the established worldview in the particular discipline. Yet also, seemingly small changes in existing theories may produce large, non-linear changes of view, as if chaotic systems. In addition, as treated earlier, serendipity, which is creative anticipation, or intuitive elements, have to be taken into account. Such factors could only become approachable if subjective, likely subconscious information would be much better addressed. This, for instance, by future high-resolution scanning of cognitive processes in the brain, or for physical identification of mental connections to a supposed universal knowledge field, as postulated by Bohm and Peat, and also Erwin Laszlo, not to mention many other authors. For this reason, major shifts, major scientific breakthroughs would largely benefit from a better understanding of subjective unconscious perception in relation to intuition and serendipity. Of note, the science transitions or paradigm changes, as intensely discussed by Kuhn and Popper, can only be approached by retrospect historical analysis. Yet even if such phenomena would be inferred from the landscapes of science and art, so-called paradigm changes are open to question, as was discussed, for example, in the case of Darwinian revolution. Therefore, the present author prefers the term science art attractors over expressions such as science paradigms, revolutions, turnovers, and transitions. 5. Music deals with the exploration of tension and resolution and at the same time anticipation. Music implies the control of complex sensations of sound into emotion and feeling. In this sense, music could be said to be more complete than science, for it seeks a harmony between the four basic human functions: thought balanced by feeling and intuition rising from sensation. Toroidal geometry has been used in many different ways by various music theorists to describe the relationships between major and minor triads, so-called the tonus torus. Triangular lattices placed on the torus surface present identical musical constructs, such as chords, regardless of the beginning pitch, and show hexagonal geometry. The implicit principal transformations are expressed as minimal motions in the tonus pattern, which can be seen as the wrapping of the planar graph onto a torus. Sound-induced geometric patterns can be induced by wave interference in so-called Chladni experiments. Interestingly, so-called causal dynamic triangulation have also been used for describing the holographic geometry of the universe and also a quantized Planck scale. Toroidal information integration and processing, interestingly, is also applied in tonal theory, and recently musical studies of the Van D. Bogart and Forshaw. The latter authors show that quantum algorithms can be coded through toroidian information compression using frequency resonance, by which information can be encoded in electronic sound that in turn can be decoded to the original information. The particular information processing procedures resembles a self-generation imagination that exhibit probabilistic fractal features for storing and retrieving information, thereby attaining a sort of neuroplastic quality. Toroidal flow, in this respect, be conceived as a modality of rotational information. It rotates. Rotational information flux that returns to itself, a characteristic that may be the very basic mechanism for creation of awareness and self-consciousness. It is generally recognized that from ancient times, music has played a crucial role in the making of modern science. This item was adequately covered in the book of Peter Pesik, who stated that in the natural science of ancient Greece, music formed the meeting place between numbers and perception. For the next 2 millennia, Pesik writes in Music and the Making of Modern Science. Liberal education connected music with arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy with a fourfold study, the quadrivium. Peter Pesik argues that clearly that music had a formative effect on the development of modern science, since music represents a conceptual force in its own right. Pesik explored a series of episodes in which music influenced science, moments in which prior developments in music arguably affected subsequent aspects of natural science. He describes the encounters between harmony and 15th century cosmological controversies, between musical initiatives and irrational numbers, between vibrating bodies and the emergent electromagnetism. He offered lively accounts of how Newton applied the musical scale to define the colors in his spectrum, how Euler and others applied musical ideas to develop the wave theory of light, and how a harmonium prepared Max Planck to find a quantum theory that re-engaged the mathematics of vibration. Taken together, these cases document the peculiar power of music, its autonomous force as a stream of experience, capable of stimulating insights different from those mediated by the verbal and the visual. Merrick, in his masterpiece, Interference Theory, used the toroidal model to describe music as a balance between resonance and damping. He stipulated, though, that harmonic science in history was long suppressed, especially by Western religion and later by mainstream science, until quantum mechanics provided a complete change of mind. The latter is most clearly reflected on the current ideas of the Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek in the article Why Physics Need Art in Picturing the Universe, as well in his books on Longing for Harmonies and A Beautiful Question, Finding Nature's Deep Design. Pitkänen, like David Bourne, suggested music as a basis for studying consciousness. The present author, together with Hans Gesink, revealed a strong evidence for the presence of generalized music scale with a semi-harmonic character of discrete EMF frequency bands that seem to underlie a spectrum of animated and non-animated biophysical phenomena, including the quantum standard model of particles, very much in line with the notions of Nimitz. Interestingly, the torus model was extremely used in the latter study, as have also been done before by Merrick, Bentov, and Young. The future of science and art in a toroidal cyberspace. Rosen 2005, that is Stephen M. Rosen, I imagine, compared real space, mental space, and virtual electronic space that connect them. His claim was that the free topological spaces are similar to a torus. Concentrations of sufficient mass in each of the free spaces create areas that bend distance and time, like the phenomenon of a black hole. Cyberspace can thereby function as the electronic unifier of the free spaces and, metaphorically spoken, enlarges the event horizon, the boundary of the black hole of human consciousness. Cyberspace can be envisioned as an electronic space, composed of computer networks like Internet. In them, information moves at a high speed. Less than 0.1 seconds are needed for an electronic signal to join the two most distant points on Earth. Rosen argues that thereby the energy mass and energy of cyberspace compresses Earth to a virtual black hole having an event horizon of approximately 2 centimeters, and thus located at a near zero distance of 0.1 seconds from us, the users connected to it. Cyberspace is thus viewed upon as the extension of the human brain that creates a new kind of earthbound integrated consciousness. It follows that man is in an advanced stage of evolution, in a symbiotic process that unites his body with electronic and biological components. The human brain, roughly composed of 3 layers, the reptilian complex, limbic system, and neocortex, has thereby acquired another layer, the superneocortex, that augments the imagination and knowledge, and hopefully also wisdom, and accelerates man's judgment and sense of time and space. Evolution in this manner connects the human brain, event horizon, to that of cyberspace and to real space. Thus, triangular joining of the free spaces bends space into a closed loop that is orbit-fold shaped. New technologies like the neural microcircuits that link live brain neurons with electronic interface will enable direct connection of our body with computer networks. In fact, we humans already seem to be cyborgs as being connected and in the near future implanted with electronic components. This act extends each human associative cortex to a new gigantic capacity of the human brain. This internet extension, or the super neocortex, which in turn is linked to all other network participants, may create a united superbrain with an integrated universal consciousness. Rosen asks, what are the implications of those insights in cyberspace art? New media art, which utilizes digital equipment like computers, is subject to physical laws. The electronic chip accelerates the artistic object from its low speed and low mass, realm outside the cyberspace event horizon to an immediate bent, high speed and high mass cyberspace black hole medium. This transformation is typical of all technologies exploiting electromagnetic waves. The huge spread of digital cameras and cell phones with embedded digital cameras on the top of the PC computers produces an audiovisual data tsunami with hundreds of billions of digital images and cell calls per year. Well, you see many names coming up here: Rosenboom, Pete, Gesink and others. It goes to show how this is actually setting now the development in topology that happened in 1855 or thereabouts is now coming to the fore, because all thinking bar none take as its ultimate start the idea of Euclidean space, and that necessitates a transcendental subject, an origo, and that will also imply the homunculus and his big brother, the panopticon. And I think most people live in that. They always have a sense that they're being... Ja, tack så mycket. They all have a sense that are being constantly observed from every direction and every view. And this idea of being observed is not in the positive sense. And there are indications that paranoia often comes with schizophrenia, is enlarged by this stratum that is present among people and then come to be an infirmity in the schizophrenic patient. That goes to going from a infirmity to a disease and becoming pathological paranoia. But most people today think they are being observed somehow, which is absurd. But this goes to show how subject and object are connected, but still can be completely disjoint. And that's another factor in classical mechanics. We can never disjoint the subject totally from the environment. Here we can. And sometimes that is absolutely necessary. I say thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Very interesting article. I'll put a sign here where I ended and we will be going back to it. Rainy day here in Gothenburg.